The sound of hoofbeats thundering behind her made Olivia Zimmerman's heart slam against her ribs as she urged her mare faster up the rocky mountain trail. Knowing that the man chasing her through the California wilderness in the summer of 1884 was her own blood, and that he would kill her before he let her escape with the truth about what he had done. Her uncle's voice echoed off the canyon walls, sharp and venomous. "You cannot run from me, girl. That gold is mine by right, and you will never speak of what you saw." Olivia's dark hair whipped behind her as she leaned low over her horse's neck, her split riding skirt catching on brush as the trail narrowed dangerously. 3 days ago, she had discovered her Uncle Marcus in the barn behind their ranch house outside Calico, California, standing over the body of her father with blood on his hands and gold coins scattered across the hay-strewn floor. Her father, who had raised her alone after her mother died of fever when Olivia was just 8 years old, had been shot through the heart. Marcus had looked up at her with wild eyes and said her father had tried to cheat him out of his share of a mining claim. They had worked together for 15 years. But Olivia knew the truth. Her father had discovered that Marcus was the one stealing from their joint claim, selling gold on the side and pocketing the profits. The argument had turned deadly, and now Marcus needed to silence the only witness to his crime. She had run that night, taking only her horse, a canteen of water, some dried beef, and her father's old pistol tucked into her belt. For 3 days she had ridden north into the mountains, sleeping in caves and beneath overhanging rocks, always hearing the sound of pursuit behind her. Marcus was an experienced tracker, and he knew these mountains as well as she did. Perhaps better, the trail ahead split into 2 paths. Olivia chose the left fork, guiding her exhausted mare up a steep incline littered with loose shale. The horse stumbled, nearly going down, and Olivia's stomach dropped. If her mount gave out now, she was finished. Marcus would catch her within the hour, and there would be no one to hear her scream, no one to find her body in these remote peaks. As she crested the ridge, she saw him. A cowboy sat astride a massive bay gelding in the middle of the trail ahead, as still as a statue carved from stone. He wore dusty leather chaps over dark trousers, a worn blue shirt, and a black hat pulled low over his eyes. A gun belt hung at his hip, and his hand rested casually near the grip of his revolver. He looked like he had been waiting for her, though that was impossible. Olivia pulled her mare to a stumbling halt, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Please," she managed, "please move. He is right behind me." The cowboy's eyes met hers, and she saw they were a striking pale blue, like ice on a winter lake. His face was lean and weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble. He looked to be in his mid-20s, perhaps 5 or 6 years older than her own 22 years. "Who is chasing you?" His voice was low and calm, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. "My uncle. He killed my father, and now he wants to kill me because I witnessed it." "Please, you must let me pass." The sound of hoofbeats grew louder behind her. Marcus was close now, so close she could hear him cursing as his horse scrambled up the rocky trail. The cowboy straightened in his saddle, and something changed in his expression. His jaw tightened and his eyes grew cold as flint. "Ride past me and follow this trail another 1/4 mile. There is a canyon with a waterfall. Wait for me there." "But he will kill you," Olivia protested, even as relief flooded through her. "Not likely. Go now." Olivia did not argue further. She kicked her mare into motion, riding past the tall cowboy and continuing up the trail. As she rounded a bend, she glanced back and saw Marcus crest the ridge on his lathered black stallion. Her uncle was a big man, thick through the shoulders and chest, with a florid face and mean eyes beneath bushy gray brows. He reined in sharply when he saw the cowboy blocking his path. "Out of my way," Marcus snarled. "That girl is my niece and she has stolen from me." Olivia could not hear the cowboy's response, but she saw him dismount with fluid grace and step into the center of the trail. His hand remained near his gun. She forced herself to keep riding, trusting this stranger in a way that defied all logic. Something in his eyes had told her he was a man of his word, a man who would not let harm come to her if he could prevent it. She found the canyon exactly where he had said it would be, a narrow cleft in the rock where a thin waterfall cascaded down from somewhere high above, creating a small pool of clear water. Her mare drank gratefully, and Olivia slid from the saddle on shaking legs. She pulled her father's pistol from her belt and checked that it was loaded, then waited. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes before she heard the sound of a single horse approaching. Olivia raised the gun, her hands trembling. But it was the cowboy who appeared, leading his bay gelding and looking no worse for wear. There was no sign of Marcus. "What happened?" Olivia asked, lowering the weapon. "Where is my uncle? I convinced him that pursuing you further would be unwise." The cowboy's expression was unreadable. "He turned back down the mountain. He will not give up that easily. He cannot afford to let me reach the law in Calico. He will not be troubling you again." Something in the way the cowboy said it made Olivia think that Marcus had been given a choice between leaving or dying, and had wisely chosen the former. "You are safe now." Olivia's legs suddenly gave out, and she sat down hard on a flat rock beside the pool. The enormity of the past 3 days crashed over her like a wave, and tears began to stream down her face. Her father was dead. Her uncle had murdered him. She was alone in the world with nothing but her horse and the clothes on her back. The cowboy stood silently for a moment, then moved to his saddlebags and pulled out a clean handkerchief. He handed it to her without a word. Olivia took it gratefully and pressed it to her eyes, trying to regain her composure. "I apologize," she said when she could speak again. "You have been nothing but kind, and here I am weeping like a child. You have earned the right to weep." The cowboy crouched down beside the pool and filled his canteen with fresh water. "Your father was murdered and you have been running for your life. Tears are not weakness. Thank you." Olivia wiped her face and looked at him properly for the first time. "I do not even know your name. You saved my life, and I do not know what to call you." "Vincent Thorne." He straightened and met her gaze. "I have a claim about 10 miles north of here. I came down this way to check my traps and heard horses on the trail. Figured I would see what the commotion was about. I am Olivia Zimmerman. My father and uncle owned the Silver Promise claim near Calico. At least, they did until 3 days ago." Fresh tears threatened, but she blinked them back. "My father always said Marcus was trouble, but they were brothers. He never thought Marcus would actually kill him over money. Money makes men do terrible things." Vincent's voice was matter-of-fact but not unkind. "You said your uncle cannot let you reach the law. Do you intend to report what you saw?" "Of course. My father deserves justice." Olivia stood, squaring her shoulders. "But I will need to reach Calico alive first, and Marcus knows every trail between here and there. He could be waiting anywhere along the road." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those ice-blue eyes. "My cabin is not much, but it is defensible and well-provisioned. You could stay there while I ride to Calico and bring back the law. The sheriff can arrest your uncle, and you will be safe to testify." Olivia hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust a strange man, not to go to his isolated cabin in the mountains where no one would hear her if she called for help. But what choice did she have? Marcus was hunting her, and she could not outrun him forever. Vincent had already protected her once when he could have simply ridden away, He had asked for nothing in return, made no demands. "Why would you help me?" she asked quietly. "You do not know me. This is not your fight." "Because you need help, and I am able to give it." Vincent's expression softened slightly. "Because your uncle is the kind of man who would murder his own brother and hunt down a woman half his size to keep his crime hidden. Men like that should not be allowed to win." Something in his words resonated deep in Olivia's chest. She found herself nodding. "All right, I accept your offer and I am grateful for it, but I insist on compensating you somehow once this is settled. We can discuss that later." Vincent moved to his horse and swung into the saddle. "Can your mare manage another 10 miles? If not, you can ride double with me and we will lead her." Olivia looked at her exhausted horse and made a decision. "She needs rest. I will ride with you." Vincent extended his hand and Olivia took it. His grip was strong and warm as he pulled her up behind him with surprising ease. She settled onto the horse's rump and gripped the back of the saddle, acutely aware of how close she was to this man she had met less than an hour ago. He smelled of leather and wood smoke and something clean, like pine. They rode through the mountains as the afternoon sun began to slant toward the western peaks. Vincent led her mare on a long rope, and the exhausted animal followed without protest. The trail wound through stands of pine and fir, across rocky meadows where wildflowers bloomed in profusion, and alongside rushing streams swollen with snowmelt from the high country. It was beautiful and wild, and despite everything, Olivia felt something in her chest begin to ease. "Have you lived in these mountains long?" she asked after a while, needing to break the silence. "5 years. I came out from Texas after the war." He did not specify which war, but Olivia assumed he meant the Civil War, which had ended nearly 20 years earlier. He must have been just a boy then, but perhaps he meant he had come west after growing up in the difficult years that followed. "I worked cattle ranches for a while, then tried my hand at mining. Turns out I am decent at finding color in the rock." "Do you work your claim alone?" "I do." "I prefer it that way." Olivia sensed there was a story behind those words, but she did not press. "It must be lonely." "Sometimes." Vincent's voice was neutral. "But I have found that loneliness is preferable to bad company." She could not argue with that. Her own uncle had proven that blood meant nothing when weighed against greed. The sun was touching the mountain peaks when Vincent finally guided his horse off the main trail and down a narrow path that looked more like a game trail than anything made by human hands. They descended into a small valley hidden between 2 ridges, where a cabin sat in a clearing beside a fast-moving creek. The structure was solidly built from hewn logs, with a stone chimney and a covered porch. A lean-to stable stood nearby, and Olivia could see a small garden plot and what looked like a chicken coop. "This is your claim?" she asked, surprised by how established it was. "I believe in being prepared for winter. The snows come early this high up and they stay late." Vincent dismounted and helped Olivia down, then led the horses to the stable. "There is a stream that runs year-round, good timber for building and fuel, and the mine entrance is about 100 yards up the slope behind the cabin." Olivia followed him into the stable, which was clean and well organized. Vincent unsaddled his gelding and her mare with practiced efficiency, rubbing both animals down and giving them grain and fresh water. His movements were sure and economical, those of a man who had done this work thousands of times. When the horses were settled, Vincent led Olivia to the cabin and opened the door. The interior was simple but comfortable, with a large stone fireplace, a table and chairs, a cast-iron stove for cooking, and a narrow bed in one corner covered with wool blankets. Shelves held supplies and cooking implements, and a rifle hung above the door. Everything was clean and orderly. You can have the bed, Vincent said, moving to the fireplace to lay a fire. I will sleep outside on the porch. There are blankets in the chest if you get cold. I cannot take your bed, Olivia protested. You have already done so much, I insist. Vincent struck a match and lit the kindling, coaxing the flames to life. You are my guest, and you have been through an ordeal. You need proper rest. Olivia wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She had barely slept in 3 days, always listening for the sound of Marcus's approach. The cabin felt safe and solid, and Vincent's presence was oddly reassuring. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. I know I have said it already, but it bears repeating. Vincent straightened from the fireplace and looked at her. In the growing firelight, his face seemed younger, less hard. You do not need to keep thanking me. What I am doing is simply what any decent person would do. I have learned that there are fewer decent people in the world than I once believed. Olivia's voice caught slightly. My uncle taught me that. Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, an emotion Olivia could not quite name. Sympathy, perhaps, or understanding. Then I am sorry for that lesson. But I hope I can teach you that decent people still exist, even if they are harder to find than they should be. Over the next hour, Vincent prepared a simple meal of beans and bacon with fresh bread he had baked the day before. They ate at the table as darkness fell outside, and the fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth. Olivia found herself studying him when he was not looking, noting the way his hands moved with quiet competence, the way his expression softened when he fed scraps to a skinny orange cat that appeared from beneath the porch. What is the cat's name? She asked. Copper. She showed up last winter, half-starved and frozen. I fed her once and she decided to stay. Vincent's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. She is a decent mouser, so I tolerate her presence. Olivia suspected he did more than tolerate the cat, based on the way Copper wound around his ankles purring loudly. But she said nothing, merely smiled into her tin cup of coffee. After dinner, Vincent excused himself and went outside to sleep on the porch as promised. Olivia changed into a spare shirt Vincent had left for her, which hung nearly to her knees, and crawled into the narrow bed. The mattress was stuffed with something soft, probably dried grass or pine needles, and the blankets smelled of fresh air and sunshine. Despite her worry about Marcus and her grief over her father, Olivia found herself falling asleep almost immediately, lulled by the sound of the creek and the feeling of being, for the first time in days, truly safe. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee brewing. Disoriented, Olivia sat up and saw Vincent moving quietly about the cabin, clearly trying not to wake her. When he noticed she was awake, he nodded in greeting. I am going to ride to Calico this morning to fetch the sheriff, he said. It is about a 4-hour ride each way, so I will likely be gone until evening. Will you be all right here alone? Olivia swung her legs out of bed, suddenly anxious. What if my uncle comes here? He does not know about this place, and the trail is not easy to find. But if you are worried, there is the rifle above the door, and my spare pistol is in the trunk. Vincent poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. Copper will alert you if anyone approaches. She may look lazy, but she has sharp ears. Olivia took the coffee gratefully, warming her hands on the hot metal. I do not like the idea of you going alone. What if Marcus sees you in Calico? He will know you helped me. I can take care of myself. Vincent's voice was confident but not boastful. And the sooner I bring back the law, the sooner you can stop looking over your shoulder. He was right, of course. Olivia nodded reluctantly. Please be careful. I will. Vincent gathered supplies and checked his gun, then paused at the door. There is food in the pantry if you get hungry. Make yourself at home. Then he was gone, and Olivia was alone in the cabin with only Copper for company. She spent the morning exploring her temporary refuge, marveling at how well organized everything was. Vincent clearly knew how to live alone in the wilderness and do it comfortably. She found flour and cornmeal, salt pork and dried beans, canned vegetables and fruit, even a jar of honey. His clothes were mended and clean. His few books were well worn but carefully maintained. It was the life of a solitary man, but not a lonely one. Vincent had built something good here, something solid and real. Olivia found herself wondering what had driven him to seek such isolation, what scars he carried that made him prefer his own company to that of others. By afternoon, she was restless and anxious. She kept going to the window to scan the tree line, half expecting to see Marcus burst from the forest with murder in his eyes. But the valley remained peaceful, with only birds and squirrels to disturb the quiet. To distract herself, Olivia decided to make herself useful. She found a bucket and went to the creek to fetch water, then used it to scrub the cabin floor and wash the dishes from breakfast. She fed the chickens and collected eggs, mended a tear in one of Vincent's shirts that she found in a basket, and baked biscuits using his well-stocked pantry. It felt good to be productive, to repay his kindness in some small way. The sun was sinking toward the western peaks when she finally heard the sound of multiple horses approaching. Olivia's heart leaped into her throat, and she grabbed the rifle from above the door, checking that it was loaded. But then she heard Vincent's voice calling out a greeting, and relief flooded through her. She set the rifle aside and stepped onto the porch just as 3 riders emerged from the trees. Vincent was in the lead, followed by 2 men wearing tin stars on their vests. The older of the 2 was heavyset with a gray mustache, while the younger was lean and dark-haired. Both looked trail-worn and serious. "Miss Zimmerman," the older man said as he dismounted. "I am Sheriff Garrett from Calico, and this is my deputy, Sam Walker. Mr. Thorne here tells us you witnessed your uncle murder your father." Olivia's throat tightened, but she nodded. "I did. 3 days ago in the barn at our ranch. My uncle Marcus shot my father through the heart, and when he saw me, he tried to kill me too. I have been running ever since." Sheriff Garrett's expression was grave. "That is a serious accusation, miss. Are you absolutely certain about what you saw?" "I am certain." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "My father and uncle had a mining claim together. My father discovered Marcus was stealing from it, selling gold secretly and keeping the profits. They argued and Marcus shot him. I saw the whole thing." "Where is your uncle now?" Deputy Walker asked. "I do not know. He chased me into the mountains, but Mr. Thorne stopped him yesterday on the trail above here." Olivia glanced at Vincent, who remained mounted and silent. "He convinced my uncle to turn back." Sheriff Garrett looked at Vincent with new interest. "How exactly did you convince him?" "I told him that the lady was under my protection, and that if he wished to continue pursuing her, he would have to go through me first." Vincent's voice was calm and matter-of-fact. "He chose to turn back down the mountain." "I see." The sheriff scratched his jaw thoughtfully. "Well, Mr. Thorne, I appreciate you keeping Miss Zimmerman safe. We will need to head back to Calico and arrest Marcus Zimmerman. Miss, I will need you to come with us to give a formal statement and testify before the judge." Olivia nodded, though the thought of facing her uncle in a courtroom made her stomach churn. "Of course, I want my father to have justice." "We will ride out at first light," Sheriff Garrett said. "If Mr. Thorne is willing, perhaps we could impose on his hospitality for the night. It is too late to make it back to Calico before dark, and I would rather not navigate those trails in the darkness." Vincent dismounted and nodded. "You are welcome to stay. I do not have much space, but there is room enough for sleeping." That evening, Olivia prepared dinner for the four of them, using the eggs she had collected and the biscuits she had baked, along with bacon and beans from Vincent's stores. The men ate gratefully, complimenting her cooking, and Sheriff Garrett told stories about the early days of Calico, when it had been nothing but a collection of tents and a few rough buildings. "Your father was a good man," the sheriff said to Olivia as they finished eating. "He helped me track down a gang of claim jumpers a few years back. He had a strong sense of right and wrong. I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Olivia's eyes stung with unshed tears. "He deserved better than to die at his own brother's hands." "He did indeed." Sheriff Garrett pushed back from the table. "But we will make sure Marcus pays for what he did. You have my word on that." Vincent gave up his bed to Olivia again and joined the other men on the porch. Olivia lay awake for a long time, listening to the murmur of male voices outside and the crackling of the fire. She thought about her father, about the ranch that had been her home, about the uncertain future that stretched before her. Everything she had known was gone now, shattered by Marcus's greed and violence. But when she finally slept, it was with the knowledge that Vincent was just outside the door, standing between her and anyone who might wish her harm. It was a strange comfort, given how little time she had known him, but it was comfort nonetheless. They rode out at dawn, with Olivia mounted on her rested mare, and the four riders forming a protective circle around her. The journey back to Calico took most of the day, following steep mountain trails down into the high desert country, where the little mining town huddled in the shadow of red rock cliffs. Calico had grown considerably since Olivia had last visited, with new buildings lining the main street and the constant noise of mining operations echoing from the surrounding hills. Sheriff Garrett led them directly to the small jail, a sturdy adobe building with barred windows, and helped Olivia dismount. "I will get your statement written up official-like," he said. "Then me and Sam will ride out to arrest Marcus." "Mr. Thorne, would you be willing to stay in town for a day or two? I might need your testimony about what happened on that mountain trail." "I will stay," Vincent said quietly, his eyes meeting Olivia's. "I want to make sure this is seen through properly." Over the next 2 days, events unfolded with a grim inevitability. Sheriff Garrett and Deputy Walker rode to the Zimmerman ranch and arrested Marcus, who cursed and raged but came along when he saw he had no choice. He was locked in a cell, and a judge was summoned from the county seat to hear the case. Olivia gave her testimony before the judge in a small courtroom packed with curious townspeople. She described in detail what she had seen that terrible night, her voice shaking but clear. Marcus glared at her from where he sat in chains, his face purple with fury, but Olivia forced herself to meet his eyes. She would not be cowed by him, not anymore. Vincent testified about finding Olivia fleeing through the mountains and confronting Marcus on the trail. Other witnesses came forward too, people who had heard Marcus and his brother arguing in recent weeks. A bartender who recalled Marcus spending gold coins in the saloon when he should have been broke. A banker who testified that Marcus had tried to sell his half of the mining claim just days before the murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge found Marcus guilty of murder and sentenced him to hang. It was swift frontier justice, the kind that did not allow for lengthy appeals or delays. Marcus screamed that Olivia had lied, that she was trying to steal his claim, but no one believed him. Even his own friends had turned away from him in disgust. When it was over, Olivia walked out of the courtroom feeling hollowed out and exhausted. Vincent was waiting for her on the street, his hat pulled low against the bright afternoon sun. "It is finished," she said quietly. "He will hang next week. I am sorry you had to go through that." Vincent fell into step beside her as they walked toward the hotel where Olivia had taken a room. But you did the right thing. Your father can rest easy now. Olivia nodded, blinking back tears. I know. But it does not make it hurt less. They walked in silence for a while, and then Vincent said, What will you do now? Will you keep the ranch and the mining claim? I do not know. Olivia had been trying not to think about that. The ranch needs work, and I cannot run a mining operation on my own. I suppose I will have to sell everything and try to make a new start somewhere else. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You could keep the claim and hire someone to work it. Mining is profitable right now if you have a decent vein of ore. Your father clearly knew what he was doing, or Marcus would not have killed him over it. I would not know the first thing about managing a mine, Olivia said. I can keep books and manage a household, but I know nothing of mining. You could learn. Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her. Or you could hire someone who already knows, someone you trust. Olivia's heart began to beat faster. She looked up into Vincent's ice-blue eyes and saw something there she had not noticed before, a warmth that had not been present when they first met. Are you offering to help me, Vincent? I am offering to partner with you, if you would want that. Vincent's voice was careful, as though he was choosing his words with great deliberation. I know mining. I have 5 years of experience working claims in these mountains, and I know you, at least a little. I know you are brave and honest and willing to work hard. Those are good qualities in a partner. But you have your own claim, Olivia pointed out, even as hope began to bloom in her chest. Why would you give that up? My claim is playing out. The vein is thin and getting thinner. In another year it will not be worth working. Vincent's expression was serious. But the silver promise, that is a good claim. Your father spent years developing it. With proper management it could produce for a long time. Olivia bit her lip, thinking hard. It was a risk, certainly. She barely knew Vincent, despite everything they had been through together. But he had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. He had protected her and stood witness for her in court. And there was something about him, something solid and trustworthy, that made her want to take that risk. All right, she said finally. We will be partners. 50-50 split of all profits, and we both have equal say in how the claim is run. Vincent's face broke into a genuine smile, the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his features, making him look younger and more approachable. Agreed. We can draw up papers with a lawyer to make it official. They shook hands on the dusty street, and Olivia felt a thrill run through her at the touch of Vincent's warm, calloused palm against hers. This was the beginning of something new, something that felt right in a way she could not quite explain. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and Vincent worked together to salvage what they could from the Zimmerman ranch and get the Silver Promise mine back into operation. Marcus's half of the claim reverted to Olivia as his only living relative, though she wanted nothing that had belonged to him. Still, the law was the law, and she now owned the entire claim outright. They hired 2 men to help with the heavy labor of mining, a grizzled prospector named Charlie and his younger partner, Jack. Vincent supervised the work underground while Olivia managed the business side, keeping careful records of how much ore they extracted and how much they sold to the local assayer. It turned out she had a head for numbers, and Vincent praised her meticulous bookkeeping. They fell into an easy partnership, and then, slowly, into something more. Olivia found herself looking forward to the end of each day, when Vincent would emerge from the mine shaft covered in dust and grinning about the color they had found. She loved the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way he listened carefully when she talked, the gentle patience he showed with the animals. Vincent, for his part, seemed to bloom in her presence. He talked more, smiled more, even laughed on occasion. He brought her wildflowers from the mountains and taught her to fish in the creek near his old cabin. He told her stories about growing up in Texas, about his family's ranch and the hard years after the war when they had struggled to rebuild. He had left home at 18 to seek his fortune in the West, and he had been alone ever since. "I never minded the solitude," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sun set over the mountains. "But I find I mind it now. I have gotten used to having you around, Olivia." Olivia's breath caught at the way he said her name, soft and careful, like it was something precious. "I have gotten used to having you around too," she admitted. "More than used to it, actually. I do not like when you are away for even a few hours." Vincent turned to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made her heart race. "Olivia, I need to tell you something. I should have told you weeks ago, but I was not sure how you would take it." "What is it?" Olivia asked, though she thought she already knew. She could see it in the way he looked at her, in the way he found excuses to be near her, in the careful way he never touched her unless it was absolutely necessary, as though he was afraid he would not be able to stop if he started. "I am falling in love with you." Vincent's voice was low and rough with emotion. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you on that mountain trail, running for your life and refusing to give up. You are the bravest, strongest woman I have ever met, and I know I have no right to feel this way, but I cannot help it." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. "You have every right to feel that way, because I am falling in love with you too. I think I have been since you blocked my uncle's path and told him I was under your protection. No one has ever protected me like that before. No one has ever made me feel so safe." Vincent reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong as they intertwined with hers. "I will always protect you, Olivia. For as long as I live, I will keep you safe." "I know," she whispered, "and I will stand beside you, Vincent. We are partners in every sense of the word now." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Olivia did not want to pull away. She tilted her face up and met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, the beginning of something beautiful. They were married 6 months later in the little church in Calico, with Sheriff Garrett and his wife standing as witnesses. Olivia wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair, and Vincent wore a new suit that he looked decidedly uncomfortable in. But when he saw her walking down the aisle toward him, his face lit up with such joy that Olivia thought her heart might burst. The silver promise mine continued to produce well, providing them with a comfortable living. Vincent proved to be not just a skilled miner but also a shrewd businessman, negotiating fair prices for their ore and reinvesting their profits wisely. Olivia managed the household and the books, and together they built something solid and lasting. Their first year of marriage was happy beyond anything Olivia had imagined possible. Vincent was a kind and attentive husband, considerate and gentle, always putting her needs before his own. He made her laugh with his dry humor and held her when she cried on the anniversary of her father's death. They worked side by side during the day and fell asleep in each other's arms at night, and Olivia thanked God every day for the terrible circumstances that had brought them together. In the spring of 1886, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. Vincent was overjoyed, immediately becoming overprotective and insisting she stop helping with the heavier chores around the ranch. Olivia tolerated his fussing with amused patience, knowing it came from a place of love. Their son was born in December of that year during a cold snap that brought snow to the valleys. Vincent paced outside the bedroom while the midwife attended to Olivia, nearly wearing a hole in the floorboards. When he was finally allowed in to meet his child, He held the tiny baby with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, staring down at the red, squalling infant with wonder. "Olivia, he is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Olivia asked, exhausted but happy. Vincent thought for a moment, then said, "Thomas, after your father, so that his memory lives on." Olivia burst into tears, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "That is perfect. Thomas Vincent Thorne." Little Thomas grew into a sturdy, cheerful child with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Ruth after Vincent's mother. And 3 years after that, another son whom they called Samuel. The silver promise continued to produce, though the vein began to thin as Vincent had predicted. But they had saved wisely and invested in other ventures. They purchased more land and expanded the ranch, running cattle and horses alongside the mining operation. Charlie and Jack stayed on as employees, and eventually, Jack married a girl from Calico and built a house on the edge of the property. As the years passed and their children grew, Olivia often thought back to that terrible day when she had ridden through the mountains with her uncle in pursuit, certain she was going to die. She thought about how Vincent had appeared on that trail like an answer to a prayer she had not even known how to speak, and how he had declared her under his protection without hesitation or expectation of reward. "You ever regret it?" she asked him one evening as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was teaching Ruth to rope fence posts, while little Samuel toddled after them demanding to help. "Taking me in that day, changing your whole life to help a stranger." Vincent looked at her with surprise, then pulled her close against his side. "Not for a single moment. That was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, too." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, content. "I was running toward death that day, but instead I found life. I found you, and I found you." Vincent pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "My brave girl who refused to give up even when everything seemed lost." They sat together in the fading light, watching their children and listening to the evening sounds of the ranch. The mountains rose dark and solid against the horizon, the same mountains where their story had begun. But there was no fear in those peaks anymore. Only memories of how far they had come and how much they had built together. Thomas Zimmerman, Olivia's father, was buried on a hillside overlooking the ranch, his grave marked with a simple stone that read "Beloved Father and Honest Man." Olivia visited often, bringing flowers in the spring and pine boughs in the winter, and she told him about his grandchildren and how the silver promise still bore his name. She told him that his death had not been in vain, that justice had been served, and that she had found happiness despite the grief. Marcus was buried in the town cemetery with no marker, forgotten and unmourned. His greed had cost him everything, including his life and his legacy. No one spoke his name anymore, and in time, even the memory of his crimes faded into the background noise of frontier history. But Vincent and Olivia's story endured. Their children grew up hearing the tale of how their parents met, how their father had protected their mother on a mountain trail and declared her under his protection. It became a family legend, passed down through the generations, a reminder that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the greatest blessings. By the time Olivia and Vincent celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary in 1894, Calico had grown from a rough mining camp into a proper town with schools and churches and tree-lined streets. The Silver Promise mine had finally played out, but the Thorne Ranch was prosperous and well established. Thomas was nearly grown, already showing signs of his father's skill with horses, and his mother's head for business. Ruth was a spirited girl who could ride as well as any boy, and had her father wrapped around her little finger. And Samuel, the baby, was growing into a thoughtful young man who loved books and learning. Vincent's hair had begun to gray at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened. But to Olivia, he was as handsome as the day she had first seen him blocking the trail with his hand near his gun. He still looked at her with the same intensity, still reached for her hand when they walked together, still whispered that he loved her every night before they went to sleep. "You remember what you said to my uncle that day?" Olivia asked as they lay in bed on the night of their anniversary. "When you stopped him on the trail, I said she is under my protection." Vincent's voice was soft in the darkness. "And I meant it. You have been under my protection ever since. And you have been under mine," Olivia replied, turning to face him. "We protect each other. That is what love is." Vincent pulled her close and kissed her, and Olivia melted into his embrace, still feeling the same spark she had felt the first time they kissed all those years ago. Time had not diminished what they felt for each other. If anything, it had grown deeper and stronger, rooted in shared experiences and mutual respect and the simple joy of building a life together. In the years that followed, the Thorne family continued to thrive. Thomas married a rancher's daughter and took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, while Ruth shocked everyone by going to San Francisco to study medicine and eventually becoming one of the first female doctors in California. Samuel became a lawyer and returned to Calico to practice, defending miners and ranchers against the big corporations that were beginning to dominate the West. Vincent and Olivia lived to see their grandchildren born, watching with pride as their legacy spread and flourished. They never forgot where they came from or the circumstances that had brought them together. The mountains still stood eternal above the valley, and sometimes they would ride up into the high country together, following the old trails to the place where they had first met. The canyon with the waterfall was still there, unchanged by the passage of time. They would sit by the pool and hold hands and remember the frightened young woman and the solitary cowboy, whose paths had crossed at exactly the right moment. It seemed like fate, looking back, like some benevolent force had been guiding them toward each other all along. "I would do it all again," Olivia said during one of these visits, when they were both well into their 60s and their hair had gone silver. "Every terrible moment, every fear, every tear. I would do it all again if it meant ending up here with you." "As would I," Vincent agreed, his blue eyes still as bright as they had been 40 years earlier. "Though I wish you had not had to suffer as you did. I wish I could have spared you that pain. But then I might never have met you." Olivia squeezed his hand, "and that would have been the greatest tragedy of all." They stayed there until the sun began to set, then rode slowly back down the mountain toward home. Their children and grandchildren would be waiting for them, the ranch house full of noise and laughter and life. It was everything Olivia had never dared to dream of in those dark days when she had been running for her life through these same mountains. She had been saved by a stranger who became her partner, then her husband, then the great love of her life. Vincent had kept his promise to protect her, and she had kept hers to stand beside him. Together they had built something beautiful and lasting, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Years later, when both Vincent and Olivia had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their children buried them side by side on the hillside next to Olivia's father. The stone read Vincent and Olivia Thorne, partners in life and love, 1862-1940, 1862-1939. Below that was inscribed a single line, the words that had changed both their lives: "She is under my protection." Their story became part of the history of Calico and the surrounding mountains, told and retold by their descendants, and by the townspeople who remembered the brave young woman and the quiet cowboy who had saved her. It was a story about courage and love, about choosing to help a stranger in need, about how a single moment of bravery can change the course of two lives forever. The Silver Promise Mine entrance still existed, though it had long since been sealed for safety. The ranch continued under the management of the Thorne family, passing from generation to generation. And in the mountains above Calico, the canyon with the waterfall remained a place of peace and beauty, a silent witness to where one story ended and another, better story began. Because that is what Vincent had given Olivia on that desperate day when he blocked her uncle's path. Not just protection or safety, but the chance for a new story, a better story, one filled with love and hope, and a future she had thought was lost forever. He had given her his heart and his name and his unwavering devotion, asking for nothing but the chance to stand beside her. And Olivia had given him the same in return, transforming his solitary existence into a life rich with love and family and purpose. They had saved each other, really, though Vincent had been the one to make the first move. He had been the one brave enough to step into the path of danger and declare that she was under his protection. It was a promise he had kept for the rest of his life, and it was a promise Olivia had returned tenfold. Their love had been forged in fear and danger, but it had grown into something strong and enduring, something that survived every challenge and every hardship the frontier could throw at them. In the end, that was the real story of Vincent and Olivia Thorne. Not just the dramatic rescue on a mountain trail, though that was certainly part of it, but the quieter story that came after. The story of two people choosing each other day after day, year after year, building a life together through hard work and dedication and unwavering love. It was a love story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations as an example of what love should be. Not just passion or romance, though there had been plenty of both, but partnership and respect, trust and devotion, the willingness to protect and be protected, to give and to receive, to build something lasting together. And so the story of the cowboy who protected a fleeing woman on a mountain trail became the story of a marriage that lasted nearly 6 decades, of a family that flourished across generations, of a love that proved stronger than fear or death, or the inexorable passage of time. It was a story that began with 5 simple words, "She is under my protection," and ended with 2 lives so thoroughly intertwined that neither could be understood without the other. That was the legacy Vincent and Olivia left behind. Not just the ranch or the mine or the material wealth they had accumulated, but the example of their love. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew up knowing what real love looked like, how it endured and strengthened over time, how it could transform 2 separate lives into one shared journey. The mountains where they met stood eternal and unchanging, but everything else had changed, because Vincent had chosen to help a stranger in desperate need. That single act of courage and compassion had rippled out across decades, touching hundreds of lives, creating a family and a legacy that would endure for generations to come. And somewhere in those eternal mountains, in a hidden canyon with a waterfall, the spirits of Vincent and Olivia remained, forever young and forever in love, reliving that moment when their eyes first met and their destinies became irrevocably intertwined. It was where their story truly began, and in a way, it was where their story would never end, because true love never really ends. It transforms and evolves, passing from one generation to the next, but the essence of it remains constant. Vincent and Olivia had proven that love could bloom even in the darkest circumstances, that it could survive and thrive and grow into something magnificent. They had taken tragedy and transformed it into triumph, turning a moment of terror into the foundation of a beautiful life together. That was their gift to the world, their lasting contribution. They showed that love was not just about grand romantic gestures, but about showing up every day and choosing your partner over and over again. They showed that protection and devotion were not temporary states, but lifelong commitments. They showed that two people who started as strangers could become so essential to each other that they could not imagine life apart. And when the story of Vincent and Olivia Thorne was told around dinner tables and campfires for years to come, when their great-great-grandchildren asked how Grandma and Grandpa met, the answer was always the same. She was running for her life, and he stepped into her uncle's path and said she was under his protection. And from that moment on, they were never apart again. It was a simple story on the surface, but beneath it lay depths of courage and love and commitment that had sustained them through everything life could throw at them. It was a story worth telling, worth preserving, worth holding up as an example of what love could be when two people chose each other completely and unconditionally. And so the tale of the frightened young woman and the solitary cowboy who saved her lived on, passed down through the generations. A reminder that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, and that love, when it is true and real and deep, can overcome anything. Their story ended where it began, in the mountains above Calico, where two souls found each other in the wilderness and created something beautiful that would last forever. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind.